All right, let's get right into this. We're going to break down one of the most unbelievable combat missions you can imagine. We're talking about a single pilot all alone who has to fly into one of the most advanced interconnected air defense networks in the world. This isn't just some story about survival. This is a masterclass in physics, in tactics, and frankly, in pure unadulterated guts.
You know, this really gets to the absolute core of air combat. When those alarms are screaming and missiles are flying, there's just no room for wishful thinking. All you have is your training, the laws of physics, and the cold, hard math of the engagement. And for this pilot, that math was about to get really, really ugly.
So, here's how it all begins. It's 9:56 hours. A lone Ukrainian MiG-29 Fulcrum is pushing its way into hostile airspace. Now, on paper, the objective sounds almost straightforward. Deliver 2 precision bombs on a key Russian supply hub. And for the first 12 minutes or so, everything is completely textbook, totally routine, right up until the moment it isn't.
Then, it happens. A piercing tone just screams in the pilot's headset. It's a hard lock from a Russian S-400 Triumph system 120 kilometers out. His heart rate, you can bet, just doubled. The Russians haven't just spotted him, they've already fired. A 48 N6 missile is already off the rails and screaming towards him. The mission just went from attack to pure survival.
And that's it. 80 seconds. Just think about that. That is the brutally short amount of time the pilot has until a very, very fast piece of bad news, already well past Mach 2, is calculated to impact his aircraft. The clock is ticking, and every single nanosecond is going to count.
So what do you even do in that situation? You can't outrun the missile. You can't outclimb it. Your only option is to outthink it. This pilot has to somehow solve an impossible physics problem. How in the world do you make your huge metal jet screaming through the sky completely vanish from one of the most advanced radar screens ever created?
Well, what's so fascinating here is that the radar's greatest strength is also its biggest weakness. See, the S-400 uses what's called Doppler processing. It filters out all the stationary stuff, mountains, buildings, trees, by looking for that change in frequency. It's that meow sound of a passing ambulance. So it's absolutely brilliant at spotting things moving towards or away from it. But what if a target wasn't really moving relative to the radar?
And that's the solution. It's a maneuver called notching. The pilot literally yanks his jet into a turn so he's flying perfectly 90 degrees to the radar's beam. When he does that, his speed towards that radar dish instantly drops to 0. And to the Doppler computer, well, his MiG-29 suddenly looks just like a stationary hill. The system dismisses him as ground clutter, and the missile, now totally blind, just sails past and explodes harmlessly in a puff of chaff he released. Incredible.
So, he survived round 1. Amazing. But the Russian operators are not going to be beaten that easily. They adapt, they switch their tactics to something way more sinister, way more clever, and they turn the pilot's own escape into a deadly trap.
They switch to something called bistatic mode. Now think about it like this. The main S-400 radar is the flashlight, just blasting out energy. But now there's a second, completely passive receiver listening silently, maybe 40 kilometers away. The pilot's warning gear only detects the big, loud flashlight. He has no idea that this hidden observer is over there, watching every reflection bounce off his jet. He's being tracked, and he doesn't even know it.
Now the S-400 is just a spotter. It quietly hands off the pilot's location data to a hidden Book M3 missile system, which is perfectly placed to cover a valley the pilot has to cross. This isn't just random hunting anymore. No, this is a calculated execution. They're using the pilot's own terrain masking tactics against him to set up a kill box.
Suddenly, the pilot's warning receiver just erupts with a new, much more urgent alarm. 2 Book missiles are in the air. He's boxed in, trapped in this valley with ridgelines on both sides. He can't dive, he can't turn left or right. His new time to impact? A terrifying 31 seconds.
There is only one way out, and it is going to hurt. The pilot shoves the throttles into full afterburner and hauls the stick back into his gut, trading every bit of his speed and precious fuel for one desperate, max-performance climb straight up into the sky.
The G-meter in the cockpit just pegs at 7.5 times the force of gravity. His G-suit inflates, squeezing his legs, trying to keep the blood in his brain, but that gray curtain of unconsciousness is already starting to creep in at the edges of his vision. He's not just fighting missiles anymore, he's fighting the plane and his own body. And he does it. He survives. A perfectly timed barrel roll and a blast of chaff defeats both missiles. But the price he paid is catastrophic.
He burned a ridiculous amount of fuel, and his airspeed has dropped to just 180 knots, which is dangerously close to a stall. He is, for all intents and purposes, a sitting duck.
And the book crew. They're not done yet. They reload and they fire 2 more missiles. But in their rush to finish him off, they make one critical mistake. They launch both missiles at the same time. This means the pilot only has one defensive problem to solve, not 2 separate ones coming at him back to back.
So as these last 2 missiles are closing in, the pilot releases his bombs. They're finally on their way to the target. He then rolls the jet upside down, pulls another 7 Gs, and dives for the ground. The missiles, moving at hypersonic speeds, they just can't make that sharp turn and they overshoot him. But this gauntlet is far from over. He's now critically low on fuel and has to somehow make it home.
And the threats, they just keep coming. The defense network now points a modern Su-35 fighter jet right at him for an intercept. He only survives that encounter because the flanker gets low on fuel and has to break off the attack. Then, just kilometers from safety, a ZSU-23-4 anti-aircraft gun opens up from the ground, shredding his tail and cutting a hydraulic line. And yet somehow, he makes it. With basically 0 hydraulic pressure and running on fumes, he limps his battered jet across into friendly airspace, and at that exact moment, miles away, his bombs hit the depot, setting off a colossal secondary explosion that just vaporizes the entire facility. Mission accomplished.
So after all that chaos, after coming that close to death multiple times, what was the actual result? Let's look at the incredible numbers behind this one single mission. It's kind of mind-blowing.
This is roughly what the 2 GBU-39 precision bombs cost. $80,000. Now that sounds like a lot of money to you and me, but in military terms, it's basically pocket change.
And this is the estimated value of the Russian ammunition, the logistics, the equipment, all of it that was destroyed in that one massive fireball. An absolutely staggering, devastating blow. You do the math and you get this number. A 3 million% return on investment. It is a number so big, it's almost meaningless. It's hard to even wrap your head around it. One pilot, one jet, one unbelievable result. You know, when you lay it all out like this, the sheer complexity of what this one person faced is just astounding. It wasn't one threat. It was 4 completely different, incredibly deadly systems, and each one required a different, highly technical, and physically punishing counter. He had to be a physicist, an athlete, and a grandmaster chess player, all in the span of about 18 minutes.
And that really brings us to the final and maybe most important takeaway. Yeah, the $2.4 billion in damage is stunning, but the single most valuable thing to come out of this mission wasn't actually destroyed. It was the pilot himself, who landed battered but alive. He brought back the priceless, hard-won lessons of how to survive that gauntlet, and those lessons can now be taught to the next pilot and the next, making that whole billion-dollar system that tried to kill him just a tiny bit less effective. And you just can't put a price tag on that.